All right, everyone, welcome back into another props video. Give me a touch on the top prop bets here in the NBA today, this Monday. Also going to get into a couple of prop bets that I like in college basketball and in the NFL, guys. We have a pretty good board on this Monday, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into those prop bets. So yes, guys, this is going to be an NBA video, and as you guys can see, just initial board is looking pretty good in terms of solid prop bets that we are getting. But I do want to call out just a couple of other prop bets that are not going to be NBA specific. I want to start with one NFL prop bet. That's going to be looking at Devon Valet to get over his fantasy score. If you guys followed my prop coverage for the Monday Night Football game, you already knew that I was talking up Devon Valet a decent amount. Earlier on this week, I got him at 30.5 receiving yards for the over. That number has went up by like 7 yards there already. His reception line is set at 2.5, but with that being favored for the over, he's likely to get 3 receptions there as well. So let's just say he gets 3 receptions and 37 or so receiving yards. He's going to be very close to getting this over already. Now, we look at the average sportsbook line when we factor in a touchdown. Now, he's not too likely to get that, but the line should be at 8.35 when we consider that touchdown likelihood. The projection data likes at 9.2, and the underdog line would have set 9. So we can see that the clear outlier here is going to be the PrizePicks line here. And guys, if we look at his hit rate, what you'll notice is that over the last 3 games, he has gotten this over. Now, why is looking at the last 3 games important? Well, the last 3 games, he's seen over 65 or around 65% of the snaps, whereas the games prior to that, he was not seeing that. Now, this is Sean Payton. We can see random workload for any player, really. Potentially even Cortland Sutton. I doubt it with Cortland Sutton. But Valet, if that workload is still there, he should be able to get this over. That's more of a bet on the workload being there for him. The matchup with Cleveland, not all too difficult, although maybe they've been playing slightly better defensively. And then, guys, I also want to get into this college basketball prop bet here. We got Nate Kalmesi for under his fantasy score. And again, this is just more kind of looking at the PrizePicks line, clearly being the outlier data point here, where we're seeing that average sportsbook line would have it closer to 27, the projection data closer to 27, and the PrizePicks line being at 29.5 definitely tells us that this line is a little bit too high. And if we look at kind of what he's been able to do recently, it's been right around there. Okay, so far this season, he's been able to get the over 3 out of 5 times. This line has been very tight. I would imagine that this has to do more with Nevada preventing it from getting the over. And so that's another good bet that we can go ahead and use on today's slate. For what it's worth, this under is somewhat favored as well. The average sportsbook line is closer to 27.5, but it's closer to a push than it is a like lock and load bet, or good bet, I should say. Never like to use the lock word. So now, guys, let's go ahead and get into some of those top prop bets that are currently popping up here on the 9 to 5 PrizePicks cheat sheet here. And so we're going to notice that we are seeing a lot of under fantasy scores be favored here. We are also seeing that we are getting 2 just kind of pure EV bets, where when we take the average sportsbook line, the data is telling us to bet the over. As always, guys, if these 2 bets are still available by the time you guys are watching this video, by all means, go ahead and place those bets. Typically speaking, I don't like to include those on the bet of the day because I know that they're most likely going to get bumped. That's the annoying part of giving content out to you guys, is that I can't control, the lines being bumped or when they're going to be bumped and all that stuff. But let's take a peek at these under fantasy scores, and this is actually going to be for this Brooklyn versus Chicago game. So for Jaylen Wilson, we are seeing that this is a heavy line for his under. Now, the projection data really doesn't like him. We look at the DVP projection going against Chicago, who actually is a pretty easy matchup. Defensively, he would get the over then. If you times that by his projected minutes, the average sportsbook line would have this closer to 24.35. Now he's only averaging about 18.4. We are going to see decently high scoring game rate, 236.3. The Brooklyn Nets are going to be 7.5 point dogs in this game, and so there is the potential for a blowout. Maybe someone like Jaylen Wilson does not end up getting that blowout run. Now, these 2 teams did meet earlier on in the season. In that game, Jaylen Wilson has 7 points, 2 turnovers, 1 rebound, 3 assists, 1 steal. So we can clearly see it was not a good game there for him in that game. Now, this was a game that ended up being a little bit closer. Brooklyn ended up actually winning that game. But with Brooklyn, I do think it's worth calling out, they did have Cam Thomas in that game. With Cam Thomas out, I think that's why we are seeing the under be favored here. But that also brings up some other bets that I think are going to be solid bets that I want to call out as well. But first, I want to just point out their kind of injury report right now. So guys, the Brooklyn Nets are going to be kind of banged up potentially heading into this game. We know they're going to be without Cam Thomas. We also know that Dennis Schroeder is someone that does benefit a decent amount with those players off the court. And I actually like his over 23.5 points. His per 36 production with Cam Thomas off the court is around 24.1 points. So not a big bump in terms of like this game, but it's more the matchup. The matchup with the Chicago Bulls, I do like. He is someone that I do expect to have a good game. But looking at guys, Cam Johnson could be someone that ends up sitting in this game. He's currently questionable. We saw him get 36 minutes in the last game, shot the basketball extremely well. He is someone that could sit, and if he sits, I do think that would boost the minutes for someone like Jaylen Wilson. So that could be something where we are getting a good bet here. But if Cameron Johnson were to sit, then it'd probably become a bet that I would want to stay away from, because I do think Jaylen Wilson would get a bump. But we also are seeing a lot of other players could potentially sit as well. Ben Simmons is currently questionable. Zaire Williams is currently questionable. These are all, and DFS. DFS is someone that gets a lot of run as well. He's been kind of decent this year. And so if all those players sit, we could be looking at a lot more minutes to a lot of players, even if the game does end up being a blowout. So one player that we are seeing an under be favorited for is going to be Nick Claxton as well. Well, let me rephrase that. It's an under bet that I like. The average sportsbook line would actually be giving this more of a 51% for him to get the over, which I find crazy, but I think this is rooted in his potential minutes. We aren't currently getting projected minutes for him just yet. I do think that depends on kind of everyone else's minutes, who's going to play and who's going to be active in this game. But Claxton's certainly interesting. If you look at his season hit rate, he's only gotten this over like 10% of the time. And the match with Chicago is pretty good, but we need him to get that additional run. We need him to get 36 plus minutes, which just hasn't been a thing for him. And I think there's a good chance Nikola Vucevic could get him into foul trouble, which has been an issue for him. Now, the thing with Nick Claxton is he typically is getting blocks and steals. Like if he gets 3 blocks and steals and actually ends up limiting his turnovers, he could end up getting this over. But you look at the season hit rate, he has consistently gotten that under, guys. Now, another player that we are seeing pop up here for under fantasy score with the Brooklyn Nets is going to be Cameron Johnson. And again, we kind of just touched on this, guys. He is someone that is coming in off of a good game. But if you look at his hit rate as well, he is consistently getting this under here. And yeah, so looking at his hit rate here, guys, we can see only one game where he has gotten the over. And that's with putting up 26 points in the last night's game. But that's the thing. This is the back end of a back-to-back. It is tougher to predict the minutes here for these guys. But he's only gotten this over once. Brooklyn has been struggling. This is a game in which could end up being a blowout. And I think it's worth calling out, guys, in the last game against the Chicago Bulls, 14 points in that game. Did have a steal, 5 assists, which is pretty solid, 6 rebounds in that game. But in that game, he was not able to get the over there as well. Again, Cam Thomas is going to be out, but Cameron Johnson doesn't necessarily benefit that much. It's mostly just Dennis Schroeder. Then another bet that we are getting also in this game is going to be AO to get under his fantasy score. Now, this isn't one that I'm particularly excited going on. There's no real change in his projected workload or anything like that in tonight's game. And Brooklyn, especially with Dennis Schroeder there, like this should be a better matchup. I mean, Cam Thomas not the best as well, but to me, I see this line being much tighter than it's currently being projected as via Vegas line. The average Vegas line 25.69, giving it about a 51% chance for him to get the under there. So when you adjust it for average fantasy score of 26, the under is definitely favored here. Now we are getting some other bets that I do like decently. Nikola Vucevic to get over 10.5 rebounds. He ended up with 11 rebounds in the last game here against Brooklyn. And he's someone that if you look at the game log, sure, it's a tight spread here in terms of him getting the over, but he is consistently getting this over here, especially when the minutes are there, which again, it is a game that should be, potentially be a blowout, but it's a high scoring game against a weak opponent. I would imagine that he, if we had to choose, I would be choosing the over rebounds here. Now guys, as always, there's plenty of bets here on the cheat sheet. They're popping up there, decent bets. If you guys want to check those out yourself, by all means, head on over to 9to5sports.com, get access to that, to this cheat sheet, the underdog cheat sheet. Use the promo code Keep Cashing. Get the first month for 20%. I'll take advantage of that, guys. But I want to call it just 2 of my favorite bets on the day as well, to not make this video go too long. I do like Anthony Edwards to actually get over his points here at 26.5, going against the Los Angeles Lakers. Another thing you could do instead of this is actually bet is over 3.5 threes made. His hit rate on the season, guys, is like 70%. He's actually 5 for 5 in terms of getting his over 3-pointers made against the Los Angeles Lakers. But a thing I want to call out here is that the Lakers are coming in off of a back-to-back. Some of them are kind of banged up. There's some players that could potentially sit. This potential blowout of 8 points could actually become higher if some players sit out on the back end of a back-to-back here for the Lakers. Whereas Minnesota's coming into this game pretty well rested. And I think that's part of the reason as to why I like Edwards to have a good game. Last game against the Lakers, he was able to get this over quite comfortably. He's actually gotten this over 4 out of the past 5 games here against the Lakers on the season, he has about a 50% hit rate to get over 26.5 points. And I think there's just a good chance, given the setup of this game, for him to continue to get this over. Now, one player that I'm potentially worried about just him having a bad game just because he's been so consistent is actually Jaylen Johnson. So the fun part about this game between Atlanta and the Pelicans is the fact that DeJounte Murray is going to be returning a little bit of a revenge game, but the Pelicans are so banged up, especially heading into this game. We don't exactly know who's going to be active in this game here for the Pelicans as it sits right now as I'm recording this. So tough to truly get into all those bets, but one player that has been consistently dominating is Jaylen Johnson. And this is more of just a traditional bet that you could run out, but I like betting on Jaylen Johnson to get over his points and rebounds. Okay, this is like the one bet where the day is actually favoring the under. The reason why I like this is last game, and they've only played one game thus far this season, he was able to get the over here. He's gotten the over in 4 of his past 5 games. And again, guys, like look at this game total, 10-point spread. So we got a lot of games here where there's going to be a higher likelihood for us to experience high variance with these games being projected to be blowouts. Like 3 of the 4 games are projected to be blowouts. I start to worry about blowouts at about 7.5 points. And so all the prop bets that I've already mentioned are a part of that tier, which we don't like. Sure, we can project for a blowout and account for a blowout, but when does the blowout occur? Does it occur in the first half to the point where for sure players are not getting their second or their final rotation in the second half? Or is it the blowout does occur at the end of the game and we still kind of get the minutes that we were looking to get? That's always a concern. But just consistently speaking, guys, he is able to crush this over, and he has done that against the Pelicans earlier on the season as well. So those are some of the better bets there as well. And guys, just real quickly, taking a peek at some of the underdog bets that we are getting here as well. So LeBron James rebounds has went down slightly from 54% likely to 53.3% likelihood for the under to hit. I bet it'll still get bumped though. We got Alexander Walker, over 2.5 assists. That one's still there. We're getting some decent bets here on underdog, but nothing that I think we need to go crazy with. So with that, guys, let's go ahead and get into the 9 to 5 bet of the day. And again, guys, if you like any of the bets that I've been calling out, make sure to use the promo codes that you've been seeing in this video or in the link in the description below for either Underdog or PrizePicks. If you guys have never signed up, that does help out the channel a decent amount. I'm going to give you guys a PrizePicks bet of the day. Now, I want to make this a 6-slip bet, and so I tossed in, the Nick Claxton under fantasy score, hoping that trend continues. I also tossed in the Sanders one for over his fantasy score, even though the data wasn't necessarily telling us to bet on that. But then we are getting the 2 of the better prop bets here: Jalen Wilson, Cameron Johnson in there for their under fantasy scores. Devon Valet for over his fantasy score, pretty decent about that one. And this is one of the better prop bets that's currently popping up. And I say currently because there are a lot of injury situations in the NBA today where that's probably going to change, because once we get more clarity in terms of who's playing and who's not playing, we'll get some more and better bets probably available as well. And then, guys, just real quick, this isn't going to be counted as the bet of the day, but I do want to call it out because it is a good kind of stacking opportunity here, and it's a good example of a stack that we can run out. And I'm calling this out because the payout is not reduced. If you guys have been playing and betting on other sports, one of the biggest annoyances with PrizePicks, with Underdog, is that they will drastically reduce the payouts if you are gaining an edge on them via bet slips that correlate. And really, with these 4 under fantasy scores here, what were we saying? We're saying that the game's going to be a blowout, right? And if Vegas is right about this game being a blowout and these minutes not being there for those 4 players, then yes, that does correlate, and that would be a decent 4-slip bet. Now, this Nikola Vucevic over 10.5 rebounds is a decent likelihood bet, 53% likelihood. Probably shouldn't get bumped up because it only is a 53% likelihood, and if he does get the over, it'll probably only be 11 rebounds. And then Dennis Schroeder, with Cam Thomas off the court, he does average about 24.1 points per 36. Now, if you look at his hit rate on the season, he's only gotten this hit rate like 30% of the games. But if you look at his hit rate with Cam Thomas off the court in a great matchup, it's closer to like 85. So it's like that's where data can be skewed here, guys. That's why I don't always like to look at like hit rates and stuff like that. But that's going to be what we're looking at today for NBA, guys. Make sure to give a like and subscribe to the channel. That does help out the channel a bunch. Also do want to call out that if you guys do want access to this cheat sheet and the Underdog cheat sheet, head on over to 9to5sports.com, get access to it for just $10 a month. When you use the promo code KEEPCASH and get it the first month for 20% off. Take advantage of that, guys. Great value. Thanks for watching, guys. Good luck. Comment your guys' favorite prop bet. Again, give a like. Share it to anyone if you guys want. That's all. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.